Well, welcome to Way to Be TV, where there's a better way to be than atheist or theist. So, at any rate, Carol, you want to start out? What have you got to say about all this?
Well, I believe that if Christianity stays isolated the way that it is, that the religion itself is going to dwindle through time. There are always going to be people who are going to be diehards and going to have diehard faith in the Bible is the ultimate and perfect word of God and all that stuff. And that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote the Gospels, and everything that's in there is God's sent. But looking at all the different evidence that we have, that the Bible was put together in a totally different way, and looking at the differences, I think a lot of the young people coming in today see the differences. I really think they do. They see the differences in what one gospel says and what another gospel says. And they're not so quick to jump on the supernatural train. They're looking for a way to improve their lives. And I think that's the reason I think the way to be, if we can keep that up and keep it limited to that, is gonna blossom.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. That if we can stay within, well, really what I call the good of Christianity. If we can stay within the concepts that we believe help people's lives, that will help us a lot. Now, it does require looking at the Bible in a different way. It requires us to ask questions that we haven't asked before, and to ask ourselves if the various sayings of Jesus are just the simple teaching of a simple man who was trying to get people able to change their thinkings, to shift their thinking more from a state of how do I build my being, how do I build my state, how do I build my character, as opposed to how do I judge the sin of other people. Right. People might think tell us about your childhood experiences, and what were the things that you learned in your childhood experiences? What were the things that you still hold on to? What are the things most important to you? Most everything I have learned in what I call the way to be, which is Jesus's comments related to how to live life, or as I said last week, his Holocaust, so to speak. But everything I've learned about that, I heard various and sundry versions of it from my grandfather, who took me fishing all the time. I believe that much has come out of Christianity that's good. I believe people who have horrible lives as a result of becoming part of Christianity changed their lives and changed it for the better. Now, let's say that everything they believed was false, but just the tenets of Jesus alone. Gentleness, they weren't gentle. Humility, they weren't humble. They didn't hunger and thirst for righteousness. They thought they were right all the time, right? They were not merciful. If you got in their face, they got in your face. They didn't want peace between their friends. They pitted people between each other for their own benefit. You know what I'm talking about? But for some reason along the way, they learned something about these tenets of Jesus. They thought about themselves, and they changed. And they became people that were a lot easier to tolerate. They became much more palatable. And in the end, they were better people. Yeah, I think Way to Be needs to be that kind of a thing, because I think that Way to Be, that's what Way to Be yields. Way to Be, the idea of building a persona, a character inside, causes you to become a person that is much more palatable to the rest of society. Carol, you got anything else to add to this?
Well, I agree with that. I think that the most important thing are those teachings of Jesus, more so than, I mean, when I was young, I was impressed by the walk on water, and I realized that a lot of my faith had to do with emotion, things that would touch off emotion, like, doing the whatever of the cross, and just, Good Friday celebrations or whatever, and it really didn't have anything to do with what I believed about life, or what I believed about myself and how I should be. It had to do with following a set of rules and trying to keep that emotional connection alive.
Yeah, and you might. I mean, if you want to, I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna prompt you to. But if you want to share your story, sometime, feel free to share your story about your own life, because certainly you've discovered what it means to change your life and to find that which causes you to have a better life and causes you to be better fit for cohabitation with the rest of the people in community. So, yeah, I know you told me a lot of it. So, and it's fascinating.
I was wondering if there's any way for us to find out if during the biblical or discussions in churches, small groups, if they're bringing any of this new information that's available over the internet into the discussion, and if there are any mind changes, or at least some discussion of mind changes occurring in our churches right now.
Right. Well, there are, because you hear it on the internet, you hear it on the web. People are beginning to say we need to, they're holding their beliefs and holding their faith, and I have no issue with that, by the way. But they're holding their beliefs and they're holding their faith, and they're doing it by trying to remodel how they present certain concepts, so that it doesn't just fly in the face of that which they know is incorrect based upon science.
Colleen did put in a thing in the chat. She said, but for me again...
Let me put it on. Hang on a minute. If I got you on. Yes. Okay, go ahead.
But for me again, some of my earliest memories are of having to stand up straight and say good morning, Father, whenever priests came into the classrooms, and the nuns with rulers. Not a fun memory.
It's interesting, because I know when I pastored the church in Massachusetts, Colleen, one of the things that happened there was about half of my congregation were ex-Catholics. And some of those, within their memories, were times when a priest would enter the room and they would all have to stand and remove their head covers, okay, and wait for the priest's permission to sit. And when they would leave the priest's presence, sometimes it involved kissing the ring, kissing the priest's ring. So that's what some people have come out of. Now, I think you're an old Baptist, aren't you, Carol?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, us old Baptists, we don't remember kissing anybody's ring. Okay? But we remember a lot of things related to the church where basically what the person that owned the pulpit said was like law. I mean, it was coming straight from God down through the air into the preacher's mind and out of his mouth. So
I don't know. Yeah. I remember a time when I talked to the pastor of our church when I was a child, and told him that I thought he should get excited about what he was talking about, and that I thought that the carpet was inhibiting him, that he should have a piece of wood up there on top of that carpet that he could stomp his foot and get excited about what he was actually talking about. And this was when I was like 12, 13 years old. I respected him. He's one of the guys that married us, and I respected him, but I really thought he ought to show more emotion about what he was talking about. Colleen says, I also went to churches on Air Force bases around the world until 1970 when my father retired. So our new parish, the Immaculate Conception, was my first experience with civilian priests and nuns.
Yeah, you went from place to place to place, Colleen, and you got to see a lot of different churches. I'm the same way. I pastored in Indiana. I pastored in Massachusetts. I pastored in Tennessee, and I've pastored here in Florida. I pastored in Southern Baptist churches who were very conservative, and I pastored in United Church of Christ churches that were very liberal. And so, I know what you're saying. Christianity is not Christianity, is not Christianity, is not Christianity as you go from place to place to place. Not just in the rituals and the habits and the look and feel, but in the beliefs also. But when you have many different views, then you begin to think about, okay, I've heard this, 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 I've heard this. Now what is it I think? What is it I think? What have I decided that I think?
Yeah.
Okay, now the same thing happens when you listen to scholarship and you begin to expose yourself to the studies of people who have devoted their lives to postgraduate work in major seminaries, major research institutes, major schools of divinity and Ivy League schools. These individuals have committed themselves to it, and they have exposed themselves to so much information, they've had no choice but to say, what do I think? Carol, do you have any last words for us?
I think that the discussion was kind of one-sided, but we haven't had a lot of people involved. It was good tonight. But I was thinking that my change of heart about things was not really going to a different church. I grew up in the same church, First Baptist Church in Winter Haven, Florida. It was when I stepped out into the real world and I got involved in politics, and then I got involved in drugs. My father committed suicide. All this stuff happened to me, and I began to question a lot of the stuff that had been taught to me through the years. And I'm just now getting back to figuring out what I do believe.
Right.
It's very difficult sometimes. Yeah.
Well, you don't have to believe the same thing as everyone else believes. And you don't,
Maybe I don't.
right. You get to decide for yourself what you do and do not believe.
You're clear as a bell.
We were beginning to have pretty darn good luck last year, pretty good results out of all this. And this year, for some reason, we're beginning to see some buffering problems. So we'll move
You'll
on
figure
to
it out.
yeah, we'll move on to the credits. And Colleen and Amber, hang in there with us. We're not going to give up on you. We're not going to give up
Bye,
on
Colleen.
the broadcast. We're gonna get it to where it works for everybody. So you guys have a great week, and here are the credits.